I wanted to explain to you how vaccines work. And now that you know a little bit about antibodies and antigens, we can kind of move forward and understand what's going on naturally. Here we have a graph that's showing you on the y-axis the concentration of antibodies in the system, in the circulation, and here's uh, a kind of an arbitrary time. And so what happens is when you're exposed to a pathogen, remember the pathogen has antigens on the surface. And so your body is going to respond to those antigens and you're going to generate antibodies. Remember the lymphocytes called B cells are going to multiply and they're going to produce antibodies. And we call this the primary immune response. Now, the primary immune response happens relatively slowly and produces a relatively low amount of antibodies. So what can happen is a lot of times when you're exposed to a new pathogen, your body is going to have a relatively slow and low immune response, and you might actually get sick from that pathogen. I actually had mumps when I was a little kid. Now, I know a lot of you guys, or probably all of you, have mumps vaccines, but I didn't when I was a little kid because nobody did at that point. And so I was exposed to the mumps virus, and it took a little bit of time. My antibodies started to increase in number, but I also got the mumps. I was pretty sick for a couple of weeks. But what happened with that primary immune response, it eventually got high enough that I got better. It cleared the virus from my body. But the other thing that it does is it produces some special immune cells called memory cells. Now remember that antibodies are very specific to a certain pathogen. So once you make antibodies against the mumps virus, they're always committed to attacking that mumps virus. Well, the same thing happens with memory cells. The memory cells that are made in your primary immune response will actually stay in your circulation for many years and possibly decades or the rest of your life. And what they can do is they spend their time searching for that original pathogen. So let's say eventually, and this amount of time could be months, years, decades, that you are exposed to that same pathogen again. So in the example I gave you, I could be exposed to that mumps virus again. And so here's my secondary exposure. Let's say it happened 5 years later. Well, I've got those memory cells circulating in my body. So what happens? They very quickly start producing antibodies against the mumps virus. And not only do they do it quickly, but they do it at a concentration much higher than my original immune response. We call this the secondary immune response. So the secondary immune response happens at every subsequent time your body's exposed to a pathogen that it's seen before. So the memory cells are allowing you to have a very rapid and a very strong immune response. And that way, those antibodies can remove that pathogen from your body and in many cases prevent you from getting sick in the first place. So this is what's happening to us naturally all the time. So where do vaccines come into this? Well, vaccines trigger a primary immune response. Now, the trick with vaccines is they don't make us sick. And they're designed to not make us sick, but trigger our immune response. So by giving us a vaccine, we have a primary immune response. We make those memory cells. So then when our bodies see that same antigen that was in the vaccine, sometime later, our immune system's ready and we make a lot of antibody in a very short amount of time and we don't get sick. So the advantage of getting a vaccine is you don't have to suffer through this original or this primary illness that you're going to get in order to have a strong immune response.